The exhibit is called Windows into the Past. So I'm Vicki Geis, and I'm a trustee here at the Historical Society.
And I'm Barbara Rimkunis, and I'm the co-executive director at the Exeter Historical Society.
First, the idea of having more exhibits at the Society is to get people to come into the building again and again. So we're planning to change out our exhibits every couple of months. We had a beautiful quilt exhibit the last 2 months. Prior to that, it was all about the Robinson Female Seminary. So we try to coordinate them with our programs, and the program for September is Past and Present, and this author, Kathleen D, is going to be the speaker. So with that, we wanted to do our own Past and Present Windows into the Past exhibit here at the Society, and it's a coordinated effort among the community. We've asked people to share pictures of the old ones that we post, so we will have them side by side here in the exhibit. The volunteers have helped doing research. They've also put together a couple of other exhibits with artifacts that we have here in the Society. So you'll see a display of authors, past and present. And then there'll be some fun artifacts that we won't tell you about. We hope you come and join us.
Some of the photos in the exhibit feature locations such as Hemmy's Ways Bridge at PEA, the old firehouse, now Otto's Pizza, Roar's Restaurant on Portsmouth Avenue, and more.
Expanding our exhibits in the building has come about because actually during the pandemic and just afterwards we moved our monthly programs to the Exeter Town Hall. You can watch them virtually or you can come and see them live, but rather than hold them here at the Historical Society, which was always a bit crowded, we now have them at the other building. That frees up our meeting room space so that we can have the types of exhibits we've always really wanted to have. So come and visit us.
For more information about the exhibit and the work of the Exeter Historical Society, visit their website, exeterhistory.org.
Takes place in Swiezynski, now called Exeter, in Nadakina, the traditional ancestral homeland of the Abenaki, Pennacook, and Wabanaki peoples past and present. We acknowledge and honor with gratitude the Alnabak, the people, who have stewarded Nadakina and its Aki, Nibi, Walakwakak, and Awaasak, the land, the waterways, the flora, and the fauna throughout the generations.
Thank you, Barbara. Welcome. My name is Laura Martin, and I'm the co-executive director of the Exeter Historical Society. And I'd like to welcome you, or thank you for joining us tonight, in person or virtually, to learn about Exeter past and present. I'd like to make a few announcements. The first one is that Comcast surprised us and changed the channel. So if you're watching this on Facebook and you want to watch it on TV, go to channel 6 instead of 98. So thank you for that. Our history trivia event is coming up on Monday, September 25th at Sea Dog Brewing Company. Tickets are $20 for members if purchased ahead of time and $25 for non-members. Trivia begins at 7, doors open at 6. As in past years, Barbara will be our quiz master and hilarity will ensue. Visit our website. There's a link on our homepage to purchase tickets. We really hope that you'll join in the fun. We also have a new exhibit. It's called Windows to the Past, and Vicki, who is the chair of our board of trustees, curated the exhibit, pulling together pictures of Exeter past and present. So you may see a theme going on here. The exhibit will be open into November, and on this Saturday we have extended hours from 9:30 to 3 p.m. Our next program will be right here on October 3rd. Dr. Steve Eames will be discussing the tension between movie makers and historians in making historic films. Tonight, if you'd like to ask a question and you're here in the building, please raise your hand and wait for one of us to come to you with a microphone. Not only will it help Kathy, our speaker, hear you, but it will allow those online to hear you as well. If you are on Zoom or Facebook, please put your question in the comments section and we'll try to ask it on your behalf. We'll hold questions until the end of the program. And now I'd like to introduce tonight's speaker. Kathy Bailey is a native of Concord, New Hampshire. She was a child in the 50s, a teen in the 60s, a young adult in the 70s, and a young mom in the 80s. It's been a turbulent, colorful time to grow up, and she's enjoyed all of it and written about most of it. She's a former staff member of the Exeter newsletter and has 40 years' experience in print journalism, covering 13 small New Hampshire towns for 3 different newspapers. She lives in Raymond with her husband, David Bailey. They have 2 grown daughters. I'm going to turn it over to Kathy.
Well, I am delighted to be here. Exeter is a very special place to me. I've worked here. I live in Raymond, so I've come over for things like the Festival of Trees. I've come over for the farmers market. And it's a very special and unique place, which is why we wrote the book. The book is dedicated to Ben Swiezynski, and about half the images in the book were provided by the Swiezynski family. The other half were provided by you guys, the Exeter Historical Society. When Laura invited me to speak, she said, "Do you charge, and how much do you charge?" And to be honest with you, I just laughed, because there wouldn't be a book without the Exeter Historical Society. Thank you very much for your contributions. Okay. Now, I just love this. This is one of Ben's. And does anybody remember when you had to register your car once a year? You had to register it once a year, and you had to do it in a local bank. So these are hapless Exonians waiting to make their vehicles legal. Look at how orderly they are. Can you imagine that today? I know. Oh, I know. I worked at the Exeter newsletter for most of my journalism career, and I spent the bulk of it in the Exeter office and later the Stratham office. Didn't spend too much time in Portsmouth, got back to Stratham as soon as I could. But there was an interesting dynamic in the Exeter office and the Stratham office. We had a receptionist, but it didn't do much good. If someone wanted to talk to a reporter or an editor, they just came right in. It was like their personal playground. They could charm the receptionist, they could distract her, and thus, we got to know a lot of Exeter's characters up close and more personal than if they had gone through the channels. When I was doing community news, once a week, a station wagon would pull into the parking lot. A well-dressed older man would get out, and he would come into my desk with a manila envelope full of black and white photos. That man was Ben Swiezynski. Who was Ben? Ben was an Exeter native and a tireless chronicler of his native town. For more than half a century, he publicized your events, he photographed them, he got them in the record of Exeter town life. Not a school event went by that Ben wasn't there. Not a lodge installation, not a ribbon cutting. He raised 5 children with his wife Mary while chronicling Exeter life. This is one of his. Happy Girl Scouts making their way to the train station to go to Boston after a record cookie sale. Ben understood the community. He was there for the big moments. He was there for the small moments. He was there for things like Memorial Day parades. I'm not sure of the date on this one, but judging by the cars, I think it's the 50s. Yeah. Ben was there when history happened, or when it was about to happen. He was there to photograph the meeting between John F. Kennedy and Bill Saltonstall, the man who would change the face of American life and the man who would change the face of private education. A historic moment. Ben was there. He got the good, bad, and the ugly, including this shot of Exeter children lining up for the polio vaccine. Don't they look thrilled? He served his country. He was a pilot in World War II. And after the war, he documented the democracy that he had fought to preserve. On the left, the League of Women Voters. On the right, a town election in this very building. He gave back to the town. He was the first advocate for the Region 10 Vocational Center, now known as the SST. I got to be honest with you, I've looked at some of the programs at SST, and I wish they'd take me as a student. It is an amazing facility. He attached a speaker to his station wagon and drove around town publicizing events. He liked making and showing movies. And every Halloween, he would host a party for the children of Exeter, again in the same building. Dave Kucharski would sing "You're a Grand Old Flag," and the Swiezynski children were usually pressed by their dad into doing something. Ben was a force of nature, so they didn't say no. I was privileged, if not deeply honored, to have the last newspaper interview ever with Ben. By that time, he wasn't leaving the Winter Street house that much. His mind was sharp, and we talked about everything. We had a 2-hour conversation ranging from his service in the war, to vocational education, to photography, to his Catholic faith. One thing he touched upon was that the physical features of his beloved Exeter had not changed much from when he was growing up. He could go downtown and he could imagine people from his childhood on the sidewalks or coming out of the stores, because this is what you people do. You don't tear down buildings, you reuse them. It's very Yankee. The people who own the wrecking balls in Exeter are as lonely as the Maytag repairman. And yes, there is a point to this. This is what I'm getting to, the way you reuse buildings. Okay. Take a step back with me in time. I'm going to talk about the 50s and early 60s because that was my time to hoot and holler and shine. And the 50s and early 60s were very different from today. If you grew up in New Hampshire, you'll remember that we had 3 Boston TV stations, ABC, NBC, and CBS. And we had a clunky PBS station out of Durham. And we had Channel 9. So it was pretty primitive. We had neighborhood schools, and Mom wasn't driving, or if Mom could drive, Dad took the family car to work. So everybody walked everywhere. And that was when your Main Street, or Water Street in this case, flourished. You could buy everything from a ball gown to a ball-peen hammer on Water Street. You could get your school clothes. Mom could do her grocery shopping. There was an A&P, a First National, a Sampson's, and a Paquette's, which was later Champagne's. And there was Woolworth's, that garden of earthly delights. Where else could you spend your allowance? Where else could you buy your first makeup, clandestine or not? Where else could you buy your school supplies? And where else could you sit at the soda fountain and get a pimento cheese sandwich and a cherry Coke? I could never eat that today, but young stomachs. The Friedman family bought this building in 1925, and Bert Friedman still runs his sports supply business out of a corner of the building. It has endured. For whatever Exeter didn't have, there was Sears and the fabled catalog. And for the housewife who really didn't want to walk downtown, there was the neighborhood market. The one on the left was Binette's, the one on the right was the Court Street Market. They were all in walking distance if Mom forgot the potatoes or if she needed an extra can of corn, and they served their purpose. There were also grocery stores downtown, such as Sampson's, which is in the McCreel building. So Mom could shop downtown, and she could pull a little wheeled cart and do her shopping for the week. As the town grew, some of the businesses moved out to former farmland on Portsmouth Avenue. The chain restaurants sprang up, and the chain stores sprang up. Some people call it urban sprawl, and maybe it was, but it had one advantage that I think you folks already appreciate. If you've got your McDonald's and your Rite Aid and all that crapola on Portsmouth Avenue, it keeps your downtown pristine. And that also contributed to Exeter looking the way it is today. Paquette's was the first grocery store to move to Portsmouth Avenue, later changing its name to Champagne's. Look at those happy customers. And my alma mater, the Exeter newsletter, breathlessly reported when the store opened. Conveyor belts on cashier counters operated by a foot lever. Popular music will be brought to the ears of shoppers by means of a high-fidelity recording set. Wow. I wish I was there. The newer supermarkets also had your bill itemized and printed out. Globe, Exeter's first department store, 1970, Portsmouth Avenue. The mom and pop restaurants mostly stayed downtown. Maybe they couldn't afford Portsmouth Avenue, maybe they already knew they were onto a good thing. And this is Irma's Cafe, where the Swampscott building is now. This building housed 3 generations of pharmacies. The Weatherall Drug, seen here in 1896, Thompson's Drug, and then Stiles Drug, before it was taken over by Whirligigs. Whirligigs offers quality toys in an old world setting, but again, they've done as little as possible to mess with the outside. And if you walk by and look up, you can still see the mortar and pestle, which is a very nice touch. The Merrill building looks a lot like it did in the 19th century. Businesses move in, they replace antiquated concerns like office supply stores. Boutiques come in, antique stores come in, but the essential look of the building remains the same. It's just different stores for a different world. Most small towns had a hardware store, and Exeter was no exception. You had the Village Paint. An independently owned hardware store was always fun. You could get information and advice, solicited or unsolicited, from your neighbor, or your lodge brother, or the guy that passes the plate at church. It was very personalized. Village Paint was replaced by a Thai restaurant, but they didn't mess with the building, which is something. Exeter continued the tradition of reusing buildings with the old fire station on the right, which has been occupied by several different locally or regionally owned restaurants. Oh, and does anybody know what this is? Does anybody know what it is today? This is a prime example of using buildings rather than letting them go to waste. I have been in your Historical Society building, and it is a gem. Again, there's a reason the Maytag Wrecking Ball guy is lonely. By the way, the library turned Historical Society is also in my War Monuments book. Because it was a Civil War memorial. Okay. Now there's the old courthouse, and part of me wishes you'd been able to keep it. It was probably inefficient to heat, it was probably a nightmare to clean, and I wouldn't want to be the person repointing the brickwork. But some things just aren't savable. I'm from Concord, and I just wrote a book about Concord's historic treasures. We are still lamenting the fact of the old railroad station, which is also impossible to heat, impossible to clean. But it was nice while it lasted, and it was a beautiful building. Okay, the one that got away. So sad. Some of us are still fuming about the Ioka. There's something about a small-town movie theater, and this one especially lasted through several periods of Exeter life. It was around for the birth of the talkies. It was around for dish night at the movies in the Depression. That was what they did to get people to the movies in the Depression. They gave them china. It presented wartime newsreels so the people of Exeter could keep up with what was going on in Europe and the Pacific. It was the site of many a Saturday matinee for an Exeter kid who could walk to it. Again, we're back to the walking thing. It was the site of first dates and first dreams. On a personal note, I went to the Stooge Fest there one year. That was weird. But denuded Ioka. Exeter was a typical New England town with many layers. You had the academy, you had small farmers, you had shopkeepers, you had the factories. I spent a delightful afternoon with Mrs. Alma Hall when I was doing the book. Yeah, I wish I had time to talk about her tonight, but she's in the book. Mrs. Hall was edging toward 100, but still very sharp. And she apprised me of the fact that the mill people had their own sections of town, and that the cotton mill people all lived near each other, the shoe people lived near each other. One mill owner and his family put a permanent stamp on Exeter. The Kent family dominated Exeter life for half a century or more. They owned Exeter Manufacturing. They had an interest in the Exeter newsletter. They had an interest in Exeter banking. They were everywhere until the mill closed for good in 1983. Exeter being Exeter, even that had to be documented. And a woman named Rebecca Carman interviewed the former mill workers on their experience there. The reaction of the mill workers to the Kents was varied. Was he a benevolent patriarch to the town? Was he a despot? Time will tell. But the consensus was that the Kents wore nice clothes and they traveled a lot, so there's that. But most people weren't the Kents, and their lives revolved around school, church, and local government. And they were fine with that. It gave Ben a career. St. Michael Church, the original St. Michael on Front Street, honestly, it looks like a Gothic wedding cake. It was torn down and replaced by a bank. Beautiful children at First Communion. So devout. The new St. Michael was built in 1958 and continues to serve the region's Catholics. The courthouse was also replaced by a bank, but a few years ago, the bank drive-up closed due to changing consumer patterns. So, who has the last laugh here? It certainly wasn't the bank. Okay, the Congregational Church has presided over 3 centuries of Exeter spiritual life. The congregation was formed when John Wheelwright came in 1638, although the current building was not built till 1798. Old by Exeter standards, but what are you going to do? I wanted this on the cover of my book. I thought there was no better symbol for this town and what it means and who you people are. My editor said no because she didn't want me promoting one particular religion. But the Congregational Church of Exeter is more than religion. When I was doing the book, I interviewed Betsy Griswold Verschay, and she was 5 years old when her father, James Griswold, drove the station wagon into Exeter with his wife and 5 children. Betsy remembers coming down a hill, and the first thing she saw was the Congregational Church in autumn splendor. You don't forget that kind of thing. Okay. Phillips Exeter Academy, 1781. Used to be a typical boys' school with them running around in their little ties and jackets and their noses in the air, but the 20th century did a number on PEA, and now they accept women. They have more scholarships for people that really need it. They have more community involvement. Town and Gown has gotten a little less townier and gownier. We also have a strong local school system with Main Street School, Lincoln Street School, and the co-op in EHS under SAU 16. People move here for the schools. This is an abomination. Honestly, I shed no tears for 60s architecture.
I do for the faculty. I was one of them with coffee, so, which some people remember, sorry kid was. So, not the building and stuff.
You know, it's hideous. But even this got new life in Exeter, and it's still serving children as the Y. Okay, eager band members at EHS, look at the coats and ties. School lunch at Lincoln Street, none of them look too thrilled about it. I can only imagine what's on that plate. Senior prank. Sandy Swiezynski Parks informed me that the senior prank in 1968 was putting the bleachers on the roof. She's mum as to how they got them up there, how they got them down, or whether she was involved. Exeter has more brass plates on houses than any town I've ever been in the sense that the houses are still occupied. I've been in places where the brass plates are on museums or the buildings are offices, but people really live here. This is the Tenney House when it was on Front Street. And this is Jim Griswold's family. That's Betsy on the end with the cat. Betsy had some interesting stories to tell me about growing up in a historic house. Basically, it didn't faze them. The girls roller skated in the basement, they dried their hair on the back steps. And on one memorable Christmas Eve, they threw snowballs from the third-story pediment, arousing the ire of a neighbor who called their mother in the middle of a Christmas party. They never forgot. Ambrose Swayze was to make a name for himself in science and technology. He invented the Swayze telescope, the Warner telescope, the turret lathe for the military, and he even had an asteroid named after him. But he never forgot his hometown. He donated the Swayze bandstand, and he donated the Swayze Parkway, which was built on a garbage dump. It doesn't look that way today, does it? Daniel Chester French was also one who never forgot Exeter, even though he left here as a teenager. He was generous with his time and talent, and he sculpted this beautiful World War I memorial in Gale Park. There were challenges to the project in doing a then and now book, or past and present book. We had to get what was currently in the spot exactly like the old picture. So this was one of our challenges. My daughter Sheila took the one on the right. The one on the left is one of Ben's. And we had to go back a half dozen times until the leaves fell and we could see the building. Okay, a few acknowledgements. Our next book, which was War Monuments of New Hampshire, The Stories Behind the Stones, features a couple of Exeter places in it. Our latest collaboration, Growing Up in Concord, New Hampshire, that came out in July. And Pam, this one's for you. Okay, that's the gist of it. That's my presentation. As Ellie Mae Clampett used to say, this has been a Filmways presentation. I will be taking questions.
So just if you want to,
I may even have some answers.
if you'd like to ask a question, just raise your hand and then you'll see me or Vicki running over with a microphone. Well, I won't be running, but I'll walk quickly.
Please tell us, I understand that the courthouse you showed with the nice spire brick was right here next to us to the left, to your right. Where did the courthouse go after that, and then what happened after that, if you remember?
Oh, John, the courthouse went out on Hampton Road, and then it outgrew that, and it went to Brentwood. And the building on Hampton Road is now occupied mostly by medical offices.
I'd just like to add that I started working for the court when it was out on Hampton Road, and then I've been at Brentwood for 33 years. I liked it in Exeter. I'm still there.
Good for you.
Questions?
On the roof of this building is the statue. What is the significance of the statue here in Exeter?
It's Lady Justice, but I don't know that more about it.
I knew it was Lady Justice. I just didn't know what beyond that. You
This
don't
was
see that in...
originally a courthouse. This was originally a courthouse.
This was originally a courthouse.
On the next floor up. And so that's why we have Lady Justice there.
Okay, thank you.
Pam, do you want to add?
No, I was just going to say that the courthouse was right underneath us.
Oh, yeah, there was a court later, yes, downstairs, the district court, but originally the court met upstairs. And I'm talking like 100 years ago, so, you know, remember, my brain goes way back.
I can tell you that when I'm in Exeter, I get the same feeling I get when I'm at Lexington and Concord, which says a lot for you and what you've done, or in the case of not knocking down buildings, what you haven't done. At Lexington Green, I stand amazed. There are people tossing frisbees, walking dogs, walking babies, students doing their homework on the very patch of ground where basically this country came to be. And it gives me chills. I get the same feeling here, although obviously a lot less bloody. People live their lives alongside the building where Lincoln spoke, the building where George Washington had lunch, alongside the Academy, which has sent out countless people who have changed our world. And it doesn't faze them. You just go on and you live your lives. You coexist with this. And that kind of gives me chills too.
Kathy,
Yes.
we had a question online. Where was Bennett's?
I believe it was further out on Front Street, going toward Kingston.
It's the convenient grocer, or as my dad calls it, the convenient grocer.
Yeah, amazingly, it's still a convenience store. Who knew? So the process. I had been working in print journalism most of my adult life. Phyllis, that was a laugh a minute, wasn't it? Phyllis and I used to work together. And I could see the handwriting on the wall. And it was okay because I didn't want to do it much longer anyway. So I started thinking about books. I published 3 novels and 5 novellas with a small inspirational Christian publishing house. And that was fun, and I found it very rewarding. But I wanted to work with my daughter. My daughter's a photographer, and I thought I could find a project for us to do together. So I approached Arcadia Publishing. The first idea I approached them with was New Hampshire war monuments, the stories behind the stones, because I've always been fascinated by war monuments and their stories. But the acquisitions editor, who coincidentally lives in East Kingston, said to me, well, we really haven't had an Exeter book for a long time. Would you consider doing an Exeter book, and would you consider doing a past and present? She had me at Exeter. And my family and I have spent a lot of time in this town. We've enjoyed it over the years. We live in Raymond, so there's nothing to do in Raymond. So we're here a lot. And I knew that with the right pictures, I could tell your story. So, is that all?
Kathy, I have a question for you.
Vicki?
So as I was putting together the exhibit for Window to the Past,
Yeah.
we do have a lot of past, and I struggled to find what we have today, and artifacts from today, and pictures of the businesses today. So I had to go take some. So we no longer have people like Ben Swiezynski, who really did chronicle the town for many years. I think Denny Waters was another one who took quite a few pictures. Who do you see doing that for towns today?
Young people with digital cameras.
We have to make
Honestly,
sure they're
Vicki,
published.
I think anybody that loves Exeter will start to chronicle it, because another thing is, you are not like other people, and I mean that in a good way. When I was doing this book, yeah, most of it was Ben, most of it was the EHS, but I also talked to a lot of people off the street, or people I was referred to, or people that just came into my life by happenstance and chance. And everybody had something. Everybody had a World War II diary, or a high school yearbook, or letters, photos. There was a woman in Stratham named Teddy Smith, and I spent 3 hours with her. She chronicled for Exeter just for the fun of it. So it's there, and I believe that, as Kennedy said, the torch will be passed to a new generation. I don't do my voices in every performance. I want you to know that. Okay, well, I could sell some books. I've got copies of war monuments back there and copies of the Concord book. Those are $24, but I'm running a sale on the Exeter book, and I'm running that for $20. So come and see me if you're interested, and if you don't have the cashola tonight, Dan stocks it at the Water Street.
Thank you, Kathy.
Thank you very much.